My mistake. Okay. I will just continue from where we started here. Let's see. Kenneth Baldwin.
Here.
Ted MacArthur, Six Rivers National Forest.
Morning.
Jerry Cousins.
He's here and muted.
And here and muted.
Sorry, good morning, everybody.
Carrie Otto, Shasta Trinity National Forest, Deputy Supervisor. Susan Bauer and Joseph Bauer.
Here.
Hi, Susan. Hi, Joseph. Carol Fall.
Hi.
Here.
Jose Hernandez with the National Recreation Area, Shasta Trinity National Forest.
Hello, everybody.
Are you, Jose, are you sitting in for Sarah today?
Yes, I will be sitting in for her. She had other commitments, so I'll try to represent Sarah here today.
Thank you, Jose. Rachel Berkey, Supervisor, Shasta Trinity National Forest.
Good morning. I'm here.
Morning, Rachel. Arnold Whitridge.
Here.
Hi, Arnold. Kelly McElroy, Shasta Trinity National Forest.
Good morning.
Larry Glass.
Howdy.
And Keith Greenwood with SPI.
Here.
I think that's everybody for now.
Okay, that everybody we got for now. So Carol, you had a little hand up for a while there. Was that just in preparation? You don't have anything at the moment? Okay. So just to kind of recap where we're at and why we have the agenda we have for this meeting. So in January, we had two separate meetings. We had a meeting with just the agency leadership folks and one with the active members of the collaborative. And we didn't do minutes of either of those so that people could feel free to say what they felt they needed to say without worrying about it being written down and passed along. And so from that, though, we took notes. That's Kelly, Nick, and I, and we kind of developed this this agenda to kind of continue that discussion and thinking about, you know, essentially 9 years ago, about right now, is when the consultant began meeting with everybody to develop kind of the template for the collaborative. And it just seems timely, especially with everything that's been going on, you know, with the fires and the new 10-year plan and the infrastructure money and a lot of pretty new leadership at the agency side of things. A time for us to kind of have this conversation, figure out what it is that we've been doing that we want to continue to do and focus on, and what it is that is new that is rising in priority for us to kind of begin to grapple with together, find the places where there is alignment between what the Forest Service needs to be doing and has as priorities from the supervisor level down with what we see as our priorities as members of the community that live and work in and amongst these forests. So kind of thought the best way we would do this is just kind of follow this along and have the Forest Service. And by the way, Jennifer Mata is not representing BLM because we kind of figured this was mostly a conversation between the collaborative members and the Forest Service. The other is that she's involved in a hiring process right now, trying to replace her counterpart in the Arcata office of BLM. So that's why she's not joining us today. So kind of thought we would just start, and I'm not sure, Rachel, Ted, you guys can do rock, paper, scissors to figure out who's going to go first, or maybe you guys have already got a plan. to kind of begin to describe the highlights of this new 10-year wildfire crisis strategy and its relationship and expectations for fuel focus and infrastructure funding, and it can just kind of follow along with the agenda. So I think this needs to be, an open discussion. So, I think people need to feel free to, where they see something they need to question or comment on, to jump in. And we've got the recording going so that we'll capture all of this. I would also let people know that Kelly Sheen has to leave 1-ish or so for father duties. And so then he's turning over the hosting to me. So hopefully I don't screw that up before we close the meeting off. One of the things, as Joseph mentioned, that we want to make sure we cover before we end the meeting is a schedule and location potentially for an April field trip. We'd agreed back a while ago that every other month we have collaborative meetings on alternating months. On the third Friday, we would save that for field tripping. So with that, Forest Service, kind of take it away. And I realize people, it's going to be lunchtime here in the middle of this, so feel free to get up and go and grab your sandwich or your bowl of soup or whatever, or your apple, and let's keep on stroking. So anyway, take it away, Ted and Rachel.
So, yeah, just quickly, Rachel, Carrie, and I spent some time kind of visiting about how we could best go through this information with y'all, and so you're going to be hearing from from all of us, kind of going through a pre-prepared slide deck and Rachel's going to go first. So sorry, I didn't mean to step on you, but I did want to say a thank you to Tara and Kelly for putting all this information together that we're going to be speaking from today.
Great.
Thanks, Ted. Can you guys see the slide deck okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm seeing nodding. So good to be here with you for a while. I did want to mention I have to duck out at about 12:30 to get to my 1 o'clock, but I think that should give us plenty of time to get through our slide deck and have further conversation. So happy that we have this moment to chat with you guys about it. Pat, appreciated your email with the list of thoughts about what you wanted or what the collaborative wanted to hear from us. And we took that to heart as we were developing this presentation for the team here, and hoping that we can have conversation as we roll through it as well as at the end of it. So please feel free to jump in and ask us questions as we roll along here. We're going to have Ted and myself doing some of the talking, and also Kelly and Tara have roles here as well. So you'll have the whole gang of us. Except for Kristen, who couldn't make it this week, which is unfortunate. But with that, we will roll in. So Kelly, you want to pop us up the next slide? Okay, so we first wanted to give just a little bit of background, if you hadn't already dug into it, on the 10-year strategy, the wildfire crisis strategy. Same topic as that roundtable that you had mentioned that's happening today as well at the regional level, and talk a little bit about what's contained in that strategy and sort of how we are interpreting it at the forest level here. So these points about identifying the right location and tools for science-based fuels and forest health treatments, developing the needed workforce capacity, and providing resources for investments in partnerships and collaboration are kind of three of the main pieces that we are looking at. What is going to be the best forest health treatment path that we can take? Do we have the workforce, and how do we build it if we don't, to get us down that path? And then how do we increase, in fact, dare I say, maximize our use of partnerships and collaborations to get us further down the path than we would be should we try to go it alone? So those have been some key discussion points for us as we start to kind of action and digest the 10-year strategy. And next slide, Kelly. Little bit more on this 10-year strategy piece is, so to put a finer point on it. So we're going to be identifying potential strategic fuel break locations across the fire footprint, but more broadly, forest health treatments, not just fuel breaks. And towards the end, Tara will be able to line out a little bit more specifically what her thoughts are for some of the Shasta Trinity lands in Trinity County on that score. But it is absolutely identifying areas in which we can make a difference, a broad difference on the landscape here. Involving partners and stakeholders in collaboration for post-fire restoration and reforestation. So we're not just looking at the front end here, we are looking at our restoration work and our reforestation work after our fires have burned through. And then the maintenance aspect is big in the strategy as well, and making certain that we can kind of carry these activities and these projects forward on a longer term basis. So it's not just a once and done, and we turn and look the other way at something else. Next slide. All right, Ted, over to you.
All right, thanks, Rachel. So just some broad kind of background on the 10-year strategy. Again, as Rachel shared, is if you haven't had a chance to read through it yet, some broad brush elements that are pulled out of it. So it's a 10-year strategy, as it says, and the goal is to treat 20 million acres on National Forest System lands in the West above and beyond what our current treatment levels are, which I think are roughly half that. So it's 1.5 more than what the agency is doing across the West currently. And there's also some goals associated with it on how many acres to treat off of National Forest System lands. And it's also looking at, as Rachel mentioned, not just what do we do for these initial treatments over the next 10 years, but how do we build them in a way that we can maintain them? Because as y'all know, you can do a one-time treatment, but that doesn't mean that it's fixed. It means that, you know, it's a one-time treatment, and we need to be able to build the re-entry and the maintenance into the strategies that we implement. The other thing it highlights is you know, using the best available science in our decision making, and that we need to implement at the scale of the problem, and that's a big deal. You know, looking at to date, we work as best we can with the funding that we've had available, but with the bipartisan infrastructure law, we're getting an investment, we're getting a kickstart or a down payment, as it says, on being able to do a lot more with this level of investment. So instead of the scale that we have been able to work on, we should be able to upscale that to the scale of the problem, and hopefully kind of get ahead of things, because we've been playing a lot of defense and fighting fires and doing what we can to try to get ahead of things, but we really need to do something significantly different to change the trajectory of kind of the conditions on the ground that we've been facing over the last few years in particular. And then the last bullet there talks about high-risk fire sheds. And Kelly, if you want to switch slides, we'll get into what that means. So what this map is here is a picture of Trinity County, and it has a picture of the fire sheds that were developed at a kind of a national scale. They're kind of coarse scale. But what you can see is there's several watershed or several fire sheds in Trinity County that have been identified, and you can see the name of the fire shed. And if you can't see it, it has the rank that was given to that fire shed. And the fire sheds that are in wilderness areas have not been ranked. So you'll see a few that are not ranked in there, but the ones outside are. And they if you can't see the numbers, they go from 34 and the highest ranked one is 90. I'd say, let me take that back. The highest ranked one is 113. But these are fire sheds across the country, and the fact that Trinity County has several that are in the top 100 highlights to me that Trinity County is going to be getting a lot of attention related to the 10-year strategy because of the high-risk fire sheds in the county. And we'll get more to that here in a minute. And I think that's, any questions related to this slide, though? There's kind of a lot of information there, and if you're not familiar with it, I'd be happy to speak to it if there's some questions on this one.
Yeah, so folks, do you have any questions, thoughts about this at this point?
So,
Carol?
so the Bramlett Place one, the rank 113, that looks like a lot of the August fire. So, is this post-fire restoration versus, prevention of future fires? I'm just kind of wondering, like, from a North Lake perspective, why Coffee Creek, Trinity Center, that area, all those communities which are outside the wilderness weren't addressed in a fire shed.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a really good point. This was a broad scale kind of assessment based off of a map exercise. I wouldn't read too much into what these fire sheds are or their ranks, other than, hey, we're going to get invested in Trinity County to do work, and we're going to have a lot of latitude in the type of work that we do, and it's not going to be limited to these fire sheds. It's, yep, we're going to get some funds to do a work to change the trajectory. And we just need to be able to tell the story of, all right, these are our priority projects. This is how it's going to affect change, and we can do that. So I wouldn't. The main point of this is that yeah, Trinity County is probably going to be in that first blush of areas that's going to be invested in, and we'll have some opportunities to do work, and we'll be able to kind of steer that ship. We won't necessarily have to be limited to a specific fire shed, because I don't believe that's how the money's going to come. I think the money's going to be coming more in general, and the agency, with work through the collaborative, will be able to determine the best places to go and how to invest those funds.
So the North Lake community, how would that fire shed be incorporated? It's not currently in your list. It's, how would that be, moved up in priority, or how could we, advocate for that? I mean, I'm just worried about the parts that were left out.
Yeah. So that's where, and we'll get to that a little bit more in the conversation, is we're looking at connectivity. So we're not going to be looking at, we're going to treat the Bucktail fire shed, and we're not going to treat things that are connected and adjacent to it. We're going to look at what are the types of projects that we can do that are going to affect the entire landscape. And I wouldn't, and that's where, so these rankings, I think they're just an initial blush for where the agency's going to, or where the agency is going to focus the initial funds and then the later funds. I think we'll be fortunate, and we'll get the early money and we'll get the late money. But there's going to be a lot to go around. Like, for example, we got $1.4 billion for this year. That hasn't even been allocated yet. And these funds, though they're coming over the next 5 years, it's going to take us, several years to get the work done. So again, don't get hung up on the number of that fire shed. That number isn't ground truth. It's going to be up to us that once we get the investment, hey, all right, great, we get this early investment, and now we need to turn around and figure out how we're gonna implement that. So it's just to show that in general, Trinity County is ranked really high, and we're going to have some opportunity for investments for work here in the very near future.
Okay, anybody else? Any other questions, comments at this point?
So this is Arnold.
Go ahead, Arnold.
So Ted, can you give us an idea although you just warned us not to worry about the numbers too much, can you tell us how high the numbers go nationwide, or how many there are nationwide?
No, I couldn't tell you the total number, but I would say they're in the thousands.
And so, I mean, is 113 probably near the top of the nation, or
Yeah.
do they
Yes.
go up to 10,004 or?
Yeah. I don't know the total number, and I could probably find out, but what I can say is that yeah, if we're in the top 100 in the nation, or even close to that, we're really high priority for investment.
But I mean, I guess I'm confused by the numbering system. It seems like, is 113 in the top 100? I don't know what the top 100 is.
Oh, I wouldn't worry too much about that, other than it's a general ranking across the West of how can the agency look at where to put the early investments, because a 10-year strategy, and we'll get to it later in the presentation, talks about who's going to get the initial focus of funds in the first 2 years, and who's going to get the focus of funds in the next 8 years. And though we don't have any of the details, that having as high a rank as we have here in Trinity County, we're likely to be on the list for the first 2 years of investment, and knowing that those funds will be available until we get them spent and the projects implemented.
Okay.
Okay, go. Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a question. This is Joseph. I was wondering about U.S. Fish and Wildlife. I mean, you still have some NEPA to do, and we have all these endangered species here in Trinity County. Are they going to get some extra money to staff up so they can keep up with your planning process?
You know, Joseph, that's a great question, and unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that specifically. We will get a little bit more into the planning and what we're working on, again, a little bit further into the conversation. But the region is working with us in particular on looking at things at a broader scale, and taking some of the workload from the local units and working at a state level, so that it's so that our projects and what we're doing is at the scale of the problem. And I don't want to get too far ahead because we'll be talking about that specifically. But yes, we recognize that is an issue and that we need to figure that out. We don't have all the answers yet.
Okay. So
I
it
have
seems
a
like
question. I do
Go
have a
ahead,
question.
Kelly.
Chad. I don't know that this has necessarily been reported out to this group yet, but the most recent Joint Chiefs project that we had for Trinity County was not funded in this last round, unfortunately. But I had heard a rumor that there was potentially some of the first flush of the infrastructure money was going to be, since these are all vetted projects, that the first flush of infrastructure money may go towards those particular projects. Is there any truth to that, Ted?
So again, we don't have the details per se. So I don't know. But speculating, because of the high profile nature of both the risks that we have here with these fire sheds, the collaborative that we have in place. I would anticipate that yes, we will indeed be very competitive for early investment related to this. And it's not just the infrastructure bill, and we'll be talking to that here in a minute, but we have the disaster relief funds as well. And I won't get into that now because we have more detailed slides to share about that. But yeah, I would anticipate some early investments related to that. But I don't know any specifics. I don't know of any specific plans to get money here. The agency is still formulating that out of the national office, but I would expect here in the next month or so we should be getting more, a little more information, a little more detail on where those first flush of funds are going to be invested. But there's a good chance that they will be here.
I just want to echo that what Ted just said as well. From the Shasta Trinity side, we do not know where the funds are going to be coming for, and or particularly how they're going to come down. Whether they're going to be coming down with projects sort of specified, or is it going to be more general? As Ted had mentioned, at this point, there's not a lot of clarity about that piece. So what Ted and I are doing is kind of reading the tea leaves on the Firesheds map and looking at the 10-year strategy language and doing our best to predict where in our footprints is this money likely to hit and when, so that we can be as prepared as possible. But at this point, we cannot at all know for sure either when it's coming or kind of in what form it's going to come in terms of which projects we might be able to roll ahead with. So all we're trying to do at this stage is to make certain that we are as prepared as we possibly can to take the greatest advantage of what may be coming down the pike.
And that question, I think, leads to the next slide, which talks about shovel-ready projects and conditions for success that Rachel's going to be speaking to. And I think that speaks to that as well.
And Kelly Sheen, just a note, I think we have had somebody join us since we started.
I believe that's Diana Sheen.
Yeah. Okay,
Yes.
go ahead, Rachel.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Pat. All right, so here's a little bit on the time frames that were laid out in the strategy. So this is what we do know is as Ted mentioned, it did divide itself up into years 1 and 2 as one tranche, and years 3 through 10 as a second tranche. And years 1 and 2, as you can imagine, given the tight time frame, what we're looking at is sort of what we call shovel-ready projects that are a little bit down the road, that we can then kind of invest in and make able to kind of make progress on in those first couple of years. So we want to be able to show some, oops, can we go back? Okay, perfect. We want to be able to show that we are making a difference on this landscape in this first 1 to 2 year period if we are the recipient of funds in those years. So the strategy does prioritize, as Ted mentioned, those high-risk fire sheds and the areas surrounding that have that kind of impact on those high-risk fire sheds, and also is emphasizing our collaboration with our stakeholders. And it also allows us, even in the first couple of years, to start NEPA for our long-term management planning in these fire sheds and around in our other local priorities. So the goal is to get some work done on the ground and bring some pieces to completion in the first couple of years, as well as get started on some planning for some bigger picture, longer term projects. So that was the focus on the first couple of years. In years 3 through 10, we're expecting, and again, a little bit of tea leaf reading here, that we'll get, or the agency at least will get another tranche of money. And that will allow us to continue our NEPA planning and our long-term sort of strategic management planning for the areas that we're focusing on, to implement on the ground some more of our fire shed treatments, and then to focus on the rotating maintenance and sustainability of what we've just implemented. So this 2-year phase, and then years 3 through 10. And again, it's unclear kind of when those tranches of money will be doled out or how, but at least we know roughly what their hope is for the timeframes once the money does come down. Okay.
So
I think this is back to you, Ted.
yeah. So this is kind of the again, getting back to that question about so what do we got? So shovel ready. If I was a betting person, I'd bet that we're going to get some early investments, and that we will get funds to implement what we have NEPA for in this area. So whatever we have completed NEPA for, we we can be ready to execute. And here's some, the WCF fuels and rec phase 1, fuels treatment, prescribed fire, the West Side Plantation EA, thinning and plantations, tip firs, hazard tree fuel reduction. There's a lot of stuff that that is planned and that we will be able to expedite getting them implemented. And some stuff that's pretty close. The roads and plantation pilot project, the decision that's coming this summer, and phase 2 of the WCF fuels and rec project is also expected in September. So there's those, and then we have on the Six River side our fire and fuels. If we're planning on having that project done, and I'll talk about a little bit more about that one later. That's a broader scale, and we have a few projects that have planning done that are not fully implemented. So we'll be pushing on those as well. Next slide. So again, going back to some of the stated goals of what does success look like? What is our end result that we want to achieve? So part of that is, building a workforce, and that workforce is not just an agency workforce. It's a state, local government, tribes, NGOs, economic development in these communities that can help meet the short and long-term needs. That's one of the major outcomes that they're looking for out of this. Build large multi-jurisdictional coalition. We have that. Again, that's why I think this is such a prime area for investment. We're pretty far along in that coalition and that local support, and we can springboard the investment that you all put into this over the last 9 to 10 years. And building on the cohesive strategy. So I'm not sure how familiar all are with the cohesive strategy, but our 10-year plan is kind of based on that. And these are 3 overarching themes that I think line up really well for what our goals are here is restore these fire adapted ecosystems, build fire adapted communities, and respond safely and effectively to wildfires. I think those are 3 goals that I believe we all share, and that whatever we work on can push us closer towards meeting those objectives. And then a little of this is just, kind of recapping what we've shared before is we need a plan at the scale of the problem. We need to use the best available science. We need to work collaboratively to build on what our history is, but maybe as a group we can figure out some other things that in the past we haven't been able to either realize or think about, but with the level of investment coming our way, maybe there's some opportunities we haven't thought of that we can explore. And then the last one, this one's kind of interesting. There's several initiatives kind of working on a similar track of, can we find other markets for the material that's out there? When we're talking about a fire damaged wood or small diameter stuff, are there places that we can look at investing that, whether it's chip, pellets, laminate, what are some other opportunities for this material to be put to a productive use and provide some economic value other than cutting, chipping, and burning it, in the woods. So there's other avenues that we haven't been able to explore much, but might be an interesting thing for us to be thinking of as we're moving forward, to help pay for some of these materials getting out of the woods. And I think that's it on that one. Back to you, Rachel.
All right, thank you, Ted. Okay, so here we are. That was the last of the 10-year strategy background slides. We're going to talk a little bit more about forward-looking pieces on that. But before we go there, But wait, there's more. We want to talk to you a little bit about the additional funding that we have received most recently, and that's from a disaster supplemental bill. So Kelly, next slide. All right, so the disaster supplemental funding, which you may have heard about here, supports our post-fire recovery efforts within our 2020 and 2021 fire footprints. And that money, as I mentioned, has already come down the pike and was distributed by fires. And so we've got some funding for hazard tree and fuels reduction and post-fire restoration activities, as well as roads and infrastructure restoration. So they really kind of tried to cover the footprint there of our fire areas with the funding that they handed down. A portion of it can support planning and includes our surveys that we have to do prior to kind of finalizing our NEPA documents, and also support some of the new positions that we're hiring to expand our on-forest capacity to do this work. We're going to talk about some of our hiring efforts in a couple of slides here, but the disaster supplemental funding has been helpful for that as well. And so a majority of the funding is going to be utilized for implementation of funding activities on the ground. So we can use some of it for these other pieces, and then we will be using the bulk of it to actually get the work done on the ground once we have the structure in place ahead of time to do so. All right, next slide. Give you a little more about this. I will hand this over to Kelly.
Hello. So the slide that you're looking at now is showing the fires that this disaster supplemental applies to here in Trinity County, which includes at the bottom, you'll see the August in yellow and the red salmon in yellow at the top left. Those are the 2020 fires. And then the red ones are the McFarland. A portion of that is in Trinity County, obviously the monument and the river. Any questions on the map before we move forward? All right. So the August complex in 2020 that covers, or that crossed over the Shasta Trinity, the Six Rivers, and the Mendocino National Forests. And because it's a 2020 fire, there has been some planning that's a lot farther along. The Six Rivers has completed NEPA in the Three Forks CE. They are working through the August Restoration EA and are starting the landline fuels reduction project. So with this influx of funds, you know, it's been really helpful to have completed NEPA. The Shasta Trinity has the August Restoration Phase 1 EA that was completed last year, and the August Restoration Phase 2 is expected in June. There's also funding in the disaster supplemental identified for some hazardous waste removal, like around the Forest Glen cabins. In addition, we've got the Region 5 roadside hazard tree EA, which the region is helping us with across a lot of the North Zone national forests, including the Six Rivers and Shasta Trinity, looking at the hazards to roads through these fire footprints. The latest I've heard is that we're expecting a decision in late June. And of course, the South Fork Mountain fuel break, which I know the Six Rivers and Shasta Trinity has met with the contractor recently to discuss that project. So that is starting to move forward. And so these are projects currently tagged to receive some of this funding. Another note for the funding, it came to the fire, or it was identified at the fire level. So We're still working through exactly how that will be distributed. Any questions on August? All right, Tara, you're up on McFarland.
Okay, McFarland was also one of the fires that received some disaster relief money. We're working through the McFarland restoration CE. We expect to have that decision out in June and be able to implement some fuel break work, get some of the fuels out of the forest, plan for some reforestation. We'll also have to take on the Rat Trap Gap campground and do a restoration, a little CE for that, so we can get that restored and back and functional and safe for our public. And the funding also included money for the 30 road, the Dubakella Bridge replacement. That's some of that infrastructure piece. And then within the McFarland fire footprint, we will also utilize that R5 hazard tree EA to cover any areas that weren't identified in the McFarland restoration CE. So for the west side of the Shasta Trinity, the McFarland planning process is further ahead than the monument or river, simply because it started first and was contained first. So that was where the planning team started. All right, Kelly, go to the next one. Monument Fire and River Complex. So whatever we do out there will be a new planning effort on the west side. We have a great deal of fuels work to do for both of these fires and reforestation. We are going to be consistent in how we approach these fires and their restoration and put together something that in the future it has fuel breaks built into it and gives us a much better chance and strategy for defending our communities. So that's important to us. We'll be including that in our planning efforts. The R5 hazard tree EA will work for both of those. We'll include some of those roads or whatever roads within the monument and the river complex. As you know, the river complex is there's obviously a chunk of it that came out in Coffee Creek, but much of it is in the wilderness. For the monument, it's completely a Shasta Trinity fire, and for the river complex, that will be shared with the Klamath National Forest. On the monument, as many of you know, the Ironsides lookout was lost, so we have some infrastructure money to address the loss of that lookout and figure out exactly what that will look like and where that will be. And as well as the trails, our trails within the on both fires within the Trinity Alps Wilderness were significantly impacted. The river complex also had a pretty significant hit on the PCT. So we're looking to get our trails back up functional and safe for the public because we know how important that is for our visitors. That's it for me on these slides, Kelly.
Some of the new tools in the NEPA toolbox, or I should say in our toolbox that I'm not sure how familiar you all are aware of, but the infrastructure bill authorized a new fuel break CE, which can be up to 1,000 feet wide and encompass up to 3,000 acres. So that's a great new tool for us to be using. The Shasta Trinity is currently, the Shasta Trinity and the Klamath are in the process of working with Fish and Wildlife Service on a programmatic fuel break BA. And so those two should play into each other really quite well. And the Six Rivers is working on their programmatic pretreatment and prescribed burning NEPA, which will also help streamline some of this restoration work. Another new tool that was recently approved for use in the National Forest System, it's been part of the BLM for quite some time, is a determination of NEPA adequacy, which which streamlines some of that analysis for projects that would be an EA, a finding of no significant impact. It doesn't cut out any of the collaboration aspects, but it does streamline a little bit of the analysis for projects that we tend to do over and over again. Plantation thinning comes to mind. And the National Programmatic Agreement under Section 106 has incorporated a new phased archaeological survey approach, which comes into play more in these as we look toward landscape treatments that cover large areas. It allows us to do the analysis and have a decision with the agreement to be surveying prior to implementation, but not necessarily prior to decision. Any questions on those?
Yes, Kelly's Keith Greenwood, Sierra Pacific. The archaeological survey approach, that has been a limiting factor on a lot of projects. How is that archaeological approach different than what we currently have?
So currently, our programmatic agreement, we have surveys completed prior to decision. This national programmatic agreement that we can tier to, there's a process to be a part of this programmatic agreement, allows us to have the decision and then and survey pieces and parts. So if we're looking at prior to implementation, if we're looking at like a 12,000 acre landscape, we wouldn't have to have all 12,000 acres surveyed prior to the decision. We generally wouldn't be implementing all at once 12,000 acres. We could do the 3,000 acres that we plan to implement first, and then move through it in a phased manner in that way. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's very helpful. And I think Tara had mentioned in a previous meeting that you're looking to staff up perhaps on the archaeological side to get a little help that way too, because some approaches are pretty intensive and some can be more extensive. There's different approaches, but okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, Keith, that was a good lead-in for our hiring slide here. And I wanted to give you guys a quick overview of some of the kind of broader efforts that the agency has engaged in. And we can talk a little bit specifically about some of our efforts at the forest level, but from the bigger picture, so nationally, the agency is rolling out collective hiring events to try to staff up nationwide. It just increases efficiencies for the HR realm to process these actions, and also it makes it a little bit easier for folks to understand kind of they can apply for whichever locations that they want, and they can understand the bigger picture of where these vacancies are instead of having to pull individual vacancy announcements from USA Jobs. So lots of benefit to these collective hiring events. And as soon as the Forest Service realized that it had the capacity to do some upstaffing, it jumped on board with these. So last November, we started with an engineering hiring event, and that continues. And I think this month they're going to be sending out offer letters to the selected engineers. The Society of American Foresters Conference we participated in January, and that was another hiring event that we took full advantage of, and also the Society for Range Management Conference in February. Back to the agency's efforts, they then rolled out a collective hiring event nationwide for foresters and forestry technicians, and that the process there started last month and now continues through this month. And we are hoping by, end of month or sometime early April that will wrap up. And then they will roll into the collective hiring event for recreation. The tricky thing about these events, there's lots of good on them, but a piece of them that makes it a little bit more challenging is there's not just a wide open panoply of different positions that are characterized in each of these events and filled. They do have to limit it to particular position descriptions. So the applicants who are getting considered for these hiring events are applying for, the particular positions that the events are outreaching. So we are hopeful that we're going to do well in each of these, and we've participated maximally to the greatest extent that we can in each of them. And I know that Ted's Forest has done the same. So it's a good time right now to be able to grab more people, get more folks on the ground, and staff up, knowing that we're going to need that capacity to roll out with some of these bigger picture projects that we're hoping for. Parallel to these hiring events and the society conferences that have helped us add to the ranks are an increase in our fire and fuels personnel. We were able to increase a bit on the hiring caps, or the standard hiring numbers that we usually see. We were able to increase a bit in our fall fire hire, and we are hoping to do similarly or even better in our spring fire hire, and that's rolling out here in the next couple of weeks. So all of these moving pieces and parts on the hiring realm are happening kind of simultaneously on the forest, and we are hoping that kind of through these efforts, and by year's end, we're going to start to see some of the real benefits of having some additional capacity in our ranks as our very own forest employees. So that's the hope for that. Questions on the hiring overview?
Has to be Keith again. So maybe this is just a rhetorical question, but how did we get so understaffed? Was it just budget cuts or a lack of projects, or do you know?
Want me to take that, Rachel, or?
I suspect Ted, with a longer history in this organization, could speak to that a little bit better. So I'll kick it to you, Ted. Thanks.
Yeah. So, I mean, the kind of the base answer is the agency has been funded at a flat level for decades. So we haven't seen many increases in our budget, maybe barely keeping up with inflation, but not quite. So when you think about that, as time moves on and our budget's flat, the cost to bring people on, the salary's been increasing, and a lot of our fixed costs have increased, but we haven't had that commensurate investment in our allocation as an organization. So we've been through attrition, we've been just getting smaller and contracting for close to 30 years now. So this is the first time in my career where I've seen the agency get the investment level where we're able to staff up again. So that's really the reason that we've found ourselves in the place we're in, was just having to continually tighten our belts. Again, this is probably a once in a career opportunity for us. I'm hoping that we can take advantage of this and staff to a level that we can return the investment that we've been given by essentially the American people to get the outcomes that we need. And it's not the other thing, and we've talked about it a little bit, is I don't see it as the Forest Service needs to staff up so that we can do the work on our own. We need to work on how do we staff up, how do we support our partners so that they can staff up and have that a reliable revenue source. So whether it's in industry or NGOs or the agency, how can we get some reliability in the system with this and bring all of our programs up and abilities and capabilities up so that we can actually make those differences on the ground and in the communities. it's exciting. It's not going to be easy. I think we're gonna have some tough times, but at least we have some resources to kind of work on as we try to figure it out.
Hi, this is Jerry, and I have a question also kind of on staffing. Recognize that it looks like there's at least a half a dozen NEPAs that have to go forward for some of the newer projects. Are you going to be able to do those in-house? We've talked over the years of partnering with outside agencies to provide the NEPA for review to the Forest Service. How do you see that moving forward?
Thanks, Jerry. We are absolutely looking at all options are on the table in this, in this new realm here. We are staffing up to try to have 2 full interdisciplinary teams on the west side. We've been sort of moving along in these last many years with one and even sometimes a partial one. So we are aiming to increase our NEPA planning capacity, or to really double our NEPA planning capacity. So that's a big priority of ours on our west side of the forest, but also absolutely looking at multiplying our capacity by using our partners to help us with the planning effort too. There's no way that we can do this alone, not even with this influx of people, as Ted said, and we are really well aware of that and looking to develop those collaborations and those partnerships for all the different phases and not just the implementation phase as we're more used to. But it's a good question. Thank you, Jerry.
That sounds great. And between the infrastructure bill and the supplemental funding and this new 10-year fire money, there's got to be a lot of cash flowing around.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, thanks, Kelly, for forwarding the slide, because that kind of leads into what the next topic we're going to talk about is we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. We have the luxury of having some big investments coming our way. And so I think part of, how Rachel and I have been talking about this and thinking about how we've been working in the past with you and between the forests is, how do we leverage that? How do we look at taking advantage of our strengths and then building on those and expanding those and trying some things and seeing if they work, and if they work well, kind of rolling them over to the other sides. Like for example, on the 6 rivers, we're looking at what we call it a programmatic fire and fuels, but essentially it's to authorize prescribed burning and pre-treatment to facilitate prescribed burning across the entire forest. So it's not a programmatic NEPA decision, in that usually programmatic decisions, you have to sign another decision to tier off of that one. The goal is to sign a decision that will authorize this work across the forest. And then the programmatic part of it is the consultation. And in our case, we already have the consultation with Fish and Wildlife for this work. We just need to get the NEPA to back it up. And so we're working through that. It's a little bit different. It's a little bit new. And so we're going to see, and if we're successful with that, then I would expect, Rachel's going to look at, all right, can we do it on the Shasta Trinity side now that, there's an example of one that's been successful, but instead of both of us going down that road, if it may not work, the Shasta Trinity is going to be focusing on some large landscape scale NEPA projects. And they're also looking at a programmatic kind of approach for the fuel breaks, where they cover that, all the kind of potential fuel breaks that you're going to have across the forest in one decision. And we're not necessarily going forward on that one, but if it's successful, then you bet we're going to be doing that same thing. So there's a few things we're both going to be doing, and then there's a few things that I think we can explore with our different teams and capabilities and see what's successful. Related to that, the region is doing some work. They're doing some large scale planning that's going to cover a lot of area for hazard tree abatement on the road systems, which is going to be fantastic. So we're anxiously awaiting that decision. The next project the region's probably going to do is looking at a programmatic or a large scale prescribed burning I'm hoping that we can kind of set the example with our fire and fuels project, and that we can learn from that and build on that. On the 6 rivers, we have a programmatic aquatic restoration document that covers the forest. The Shasta Trinity is looking at getting something like that and making theirs better than ours. Ours is, I think, is good. It's a good start, but there's some things we learned that the Shasta Trinity is going to be able to build on and make their decision probably better and more flexible than where the one on the 6 rivers are. So there's just a lot of large scale things we're going to be able to look at. And I think, working with the collaborative group, you're going to help us understand, all right, what are those priorities? What do we need to focus? What do we need to focus on first? And then what's coming on next? And how do we want to approach kind of tackling those, knowing that there's a little bit of differences between the communities that we serve and what might be the most important thing for us to tackle with our limited resources. Even so, and what I mean by limited resources, I mean, we're going to get a lot of money put towards us, but we still have, we have the ability to plan in-house. We're going to have the ability to work with partners on planning, and then I think we're also going to explore contracting. So we're going to be able to go on all fronts to try to get ahead of things, but there's still just so many people here that are familiar with the areas, that are familiar with what we need to do, that are familiar with our zones of agreement. So it's still going to be, there's still going to be some bottlenecks, but I think we're working on widening those limitations so that we can really move forward in a lot of different areas. But we don't want to go so much that we're overwhelming and getting ahead of ourselves that we're not going to be successful. We need it. We have to be successful. So however we move forward, doing it in a way that we're doing it together, and that we're not biting off more than we think we can actually get done, but we're getting achievable chunks taken care of every year. Rachel, did you want to add anything to that?
That was well said, Ted. I don't have anything more on that.
I mean, they're exciting times. I can't help but be optimistic about what's in front of us. And I think the relationship that we've built over the last several years, we're going to be able to leverage that. We're going to be able to demonstrate that we are a good investment here in Trinity County, and that we'll be able to demonstrate what can be done when invested in.
So looking to the future, and then we're going to roll into our very last slide. But you know what? One thing, in addition to what Ted was mentioning, that I did want to point out is we are really excited about the opportunity for the West Side. It has been a big focus of me and Carrie's for quite a while now. Knowing that this money was coming in, how do we set up our West Side staff for success? How do we look at things differently on the West Side, and make sure that that we're implementing on the ground, moving things forward, and really showing those that are investing in us, like the Washington office and our regional office, that we can get things done out there and that we are a good investment. So we're excited about this next phase. And we're trying to sort of look at it at all angles and make sure that we've captured each aspect of this that we need to capture to make certain that we're successful. So having the collaboration of our partners and collaboratives like you guys is going to be really important to us, to make sure that we are moving along in a way that's consistent with what the community wants, and in a way that's going to be successful for all of us kind of in the long run, and not just kind of in the immediate future. So we think it's a really good time, and we're happy to be here to kind of usher this in for the Forest Service.
I see Carol has her cartoon hand up.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Carol.
So I don't know, maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but since you haven't gotten to the last slide, but so I'm still a little confused. So you have projects in mind in the north part of the county, like the Bowerman Ridge fuel break and potentially the Highway 3 fuel break that aren't in a priority fire shed. So does that mean that they drop to being a lower priority? Second part of the question is, so specifically then, how does there's that next slide, perfect. How does the collaborative help you figure out these priorities? I mean, like I started to say earlier, do we advocate for additional fire sheds? Do we get more involved in the program of work again? I mean, how do we address, to me, there's a disconnect between the fire sheds and where you've identified and where you have NEPA going on projects. So how do you fix that?
It's a great question, Carol, and I don't have an answer for you yet on that because I don't have enough clarity on how this money, what the sideboards are going to be as this money rolls down. Certainly the staff that we're staffing up is going to cover the entire west side of the forest, but the money from the different sources that we're getting can come down in a variety of ways. It can come down very specifically, it can come down generally, it can come down tied to a project or to a particular area. So we don't know yet, as with the big pot of money. This is the bipartisan infrastructure law money that we're talking about. We don't know yet quite how that's going to look. So it's we're a little early to have the conversation on exactly what we're going to be able to do with it, or how we can work together, with the collaborative to ensure that the priorities are being looked at appropriately and with the appropriate amount of energy from the forest. So I would say on that question, hold tight, more to come. And this is kind of the first of what will be many conversations about how that looks once we get a little more clarity. I should have mentioned when I was talking about the 10-year strategy, which does tier a bit to the bipartisan infrastructure law, that the region right now, and the reason that we have the regional roundtables going on, the region right now has been tasked with coming up with its own implementation plan for the 10-year strategy. So we're not even at the level where the region has sussed out exactly how it's going to want to see this rolled out. So again, super early days for that particular initiative, and we don't have a ton of clarity. So I get why you're a little confused as well. There's not a lot of granularity yet on how that is actually going to get implemented on the ground. So we do have to kind of wait and see how that rolls out, both from the regional level, and then we can make some decisions also from the forest level, I suspect. Ted, did you have any additions on that?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add is that, I mean, we're talking millions of dollars of investment. They're going to be coming to do certain types of work. And the types of work that's going to be highlighted are how do we affect the change in trajectory in how fire behaves on the landscape, and whether a project is in a pre-identified fire shed or not, it connects. And so what we're going to be working on is demonstrating that these efforts are all connected, and by doing this, it's going to affect things outside of where this is at. So I'm not so worried about the specific boundaries, but the overall approach is the work we're doing going to affect change and get the results we're looking for. And there's going to be a lot of money coming in to do that work. And especially if NEPA is done or really close to being done, that's going to get early investment no matter where it's at, because it's ready to go. And then, we'll be able to build on that.
So then, as far as the collaborative goes, I mean, you're still not sure what our role is, but I guess I'm hearing that the Forest Service is going to be much more active in the collaborative than they've been in the last year or two. If you want to keep that communication going.
So what I won't speak for Rachel, but what I look at is for the rangers to really be engaged, because they're the tip of the spear from the agency side of things, of working with you all and helping navigate what are the priorities of the collaborative, what are the types of things that we want to focus on. So absolutely, I see the collaborative having a big role in yeah, we've got the stuff that we've been working on and that we've got going, but beyond that, taking the next step. All right, what's next? What are the things that you all value and think are the right things to focus on moving forward, and help us kind of on that front end get that pre-planning done and those ideas of, hey, yeah, this is next, this is most important. You have that knowledge and that background to these are the spots that if we invest in are going to make a big difference. And it's unfortunate Kristen couldn't be here, but she'll really be that point person working with y'all on the Six River side and working really closely with Tara. And then Rachel and I are going to be really working closely together to make sure that we're engaging appropriately and kind of you have the buy-in and are getting that input in what is it that we need to focus on? What is it? Where do we need to go? And what is the type of thing that we need to go that's going to be most effective in this landscape?
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And on that note, on that theme, I'd like to give Tara a moment to talk a little bit about this slide.
Sure. Thank you, Rachel.
Yep.
So Carol, to let you know, we do continue to get pilot. We want to get that done. Even though we have all these other things going on, that remains the #1 priority. Rachel has made that very clear to the West Side and to me that we're going to get that done. McFarland is going to get done. Sorry, I'm going to lose track of so McFarland, August phase 2 will get done. It actually, we're fortunate we have that underway, so it'll help us with these disaster funds. But there is not, Bowerman is continuing, and if anything, we're looking to increase our capacity with our partners to not only help us do what we were doing, but to do more. So to the extent that all these projects can be a this and that and not in this or that, we're definitely want to continue the things we had going on. A lot of what we're doing now and what we need to be doing is sort of what I always tell Rachel is like preparing for rain, right? We need to have some different alternatives, have some ideas of, hey, once the money kind of shakes down, we will have ideas and work with our communities and with our partners on good ways to look to implement that. The Trinity Collaborative is a wonderful partner to help us figure out what those priorities are. Also the subgroup for rec and the subgroup for fuel breaks. We also have the Trinity County Community Wildfire Protection Plan has identified some of the areas that were a really big concern. That's another great tool. Plus we have public meetings that are coming up, and we have fire safe councils. And one thing Trinity County does not lack is people that are invested in their national forests. And so it's, getting everyone to the table and kind of finding those overlapping circles of priorities and figuring out where we can use the money and what to aim it at. That'll be, I'm really, Ted hit the nail on the head. This is the most excited, and I'm a pretty excitable person. This is the most excited I've been with the Forest Service in a really long time. Having not only the internal staff to do what we need to do in Trinity County, and we're behind, but also to be able to work with our partners and work with the stakeholders for shared stewardship to really get the work done in Trinity County that we need to get done. And I'm so looking forward to having a healthy forest and to getting green trees back in the ground and to having these fuel breaks. And Highway 3, regardless of what fire escape or whatever else it sits in, Carol, it's very obvious. If we didn't know before it was a critical route of egress, we certainly know after last summer. So we'll work through these things together, and I'm going to share information. I think I will always be available to this group. I report to the Board of Supervisors as well. So just continue to call my cell phone, hit me up, and we will need to schedule pretty recurring meetings as this starts to become more and more of a reality, and we start to kind of hone in on those targets. That's kind of where I'm at. I am excited and actively seeking your input on the front end. And then when we do these planning efforts, Ted, sorry, Ted, I know I'm long-winded, but one of the things we talked about is there's some short-term CE fuel break stuff we could do. And there's also that landscape level analysis we can do and include that fuel break, include the fuel break work in the larger landscape. And in those larger landscapes, we can also address some of our recreation needs, some of our special uses needs, and really, look across all the resources in that chunk of ground to do the good work that's just long overdue. And then we'll give our firefighters a much better chance and a safer environment to go to work and do what they need to do. So that's the end of my spiel. Ted, you got anything else?
The one thing that you shared that just really resonated is that it all resonated, but we've been in a place of trying to do more with less, or to try to do more, do things differently so that we can use our limited resources to get more done. But we're finally in a place that let's do more with more. So how do we best invest so that we're investing in the right places, so that we can actually see the changes on the ground that are going to make the differences that we're looking for. So just as Tara mentioned, it's an exciting time, and we're going to get a chance to really test out this collaborative and the relationships and see if we can get what we've been pushing and struggling towards for the last several years.
So questions, comments, thoughts from the group before Rachel slips away.
This is Keith.
Go
If you
ahead,
don't
Keith.
mind. I liked what Tara said, and she said it before about landscape level project planning so that we could perhaps make some of these projects. I just read the briefing that you sent, Pat, about the inception of the collaborative group, and it kind of starts off with there was no timber sales, no nothing in a particular period of time. And so you all got together and said, hey, let's see if we can get something done. So if you work on a landscape level, as Tara described, perhaps we can make these projects to where they're not as dependent, perhaps in the long term, on continued funding efforts from Congress, but rather be a little bit of self-sustaining, maybe similar to the community forest model. So I just think that's an opportunity, and I hope that the collaborative and the Forest Service are willing to do projects that help fund themselves with a little timber too.
Okay, thank you, Keith. So I have Carol with her hand up.
I just wanted to make a quick point before Rachel left that originally the collaborative had more than forestry issues. There were a lot of other things dealing with the federal agencies. So illegal cannabis grows and on the marijuana committee and all the recreation committee stuff. And so I just want to, I don't know what the collaborative is going to decide, which things they want to keep under that umbrella, but I just wanted to point out that potentially we would be asking you for a lot more, interaction on other topics. So anyway, that was it.
Okay.
Thanks, Carol.
Okay.
Good to know.
Any others? This is our chance. So I have a question for everybody. Oh, go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, I wanted to drill down on something specific. They were talking about, Ted was talking about shovel-ready projects, and that all makes sense. I get it, but I hope that we're going to have learned our lesson with some of these projects. One of them that was mentioned specifically was West Side plantation thin. And hopefully we learned our lesson with that. I mean, it's about halfway done or a little more than halfway done. And the thinning part of it was fine, but the fuels cleanup part of it failed completely. And when August complex fire came to those units, it just burned them up. So I hope that we're going to learn from that lesson and do a better job with the extra money that we're getting of doing fuels cleanups. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Larry. So my question to everybody, Forest Service folks plus members is, as a facilitator, what I keep wondering and why I started this whole hit the reset button is, what is it about how we operate, how we function now that we need to alter or change to be more effective in our interactions and collaboration with the Forest Service? Are there things that we could be doing better? I mean, one of my observations has been, I know everybody always talks about how the Forest Service is not particularly nimble. It's a big ship that takes a long time to turn. But our processes are not particularly nimble either. With our we only meet once every other month. We miss maybe some timely opportunities to interact and coordinate with the agencies. So I'm just curious if there are things that we could be doing or change how we're doing to be more helpful to the Forest Service. If that makes sense. Whoa.
So this is Jerry talking, and I appreciate that, Pat. But I was thinking that this is the first time, and I don't have a tremendously long history, that I felt this much enthusiasm from the Forest Service about doing something and change, and there's resources to be able to implement. And the invitations that we have had in several meetings about coming to the table earlier for projects is very good. And I think that will help us really become engaged and help us make decisions that will benefit all of these processes. So thanks for the enthusiasm.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Jerry.
Hey, Pat, this is Keith.
Go ahead, Keith.
And maybe you guys have talked about this on previous collaborative meetings, because I think you have the on the ground. We got to get on the ground, I think, and reach some level of understanding, whether it's complete consensus or at least agreement to try a few different things in an area of green and an area of black, because I think we're going to be looking at, plenty of black, but we also have plenty that could soon be black. I mean, in the next very short time. So if we don't know what we're going to do with it pre-burn, or we don't know what we're going to do with it after it burns, maybe we need to get together as often as we need to until we reach that level of agreement to pass on to the Forest Service what our recommendations are, so that we're not working behind the scenes post evaluation and prescription.
Good thought. Thank you, Keith. Okay,
Pat,
yeah, Joseph.
I would suggest that, again, we rely upon more frequent meetings, more field trips, and more committee type collaboration with the agencies. Clearly, with what's coming down the line here, with as much money as it sounds like it will be, we probably need to go on several field trips and see where the agreements are and where the problems are. Like Larry just brought up West Side, I've seen this fuels problem everywhere that the Forest Service has been working in the past few years. Is way too much fuel left behind, didn't accomplish the goal of making the landscape more fire resilient. So the way to figure that out is to get us out on the ground and talk about what could be done and what should be done. So
Okay.
anyway,
So, why don't we talk about a few? Yeah. Why don't we talk about a field trip for April then?
We should. Sound like there's probably 3 projects that are ready to implement that's very close to it. It's pilot project, which we have an interest in. And while we're talking about it, I would hope that we could get a sample mark out there, because we're not sure who the Forest Service is going to use to do the marking. Watershed Center has marked our prescription in the past, so they're probably a good candidate to do that. But we need to see a sample mark, because other members of the fuel break work group have commented that we don't really know what we're gonna get out there. And to see a sample mark would be reassuring. Other field trips, we probably ought to go to August Phase 2. We ought to go to McFarland. They're both close to implementation or decision-making anyway. And there are problems with both of those projects that we need to talk about on the ground.
Okay. So that's is that doable as one field trip, or that's multiple field trips?
That's 3 field trips.
Okay. So Tara,
Hey, Pat.
yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say that in response to Joseph's, which I think tied in with what I was talking about, was that I'd be happy to bring some flagging in. I'd like for some of the collaborative members to flag a little area, in lieu of marking trees, flag the trees that you think should be cut and then see what it looks like. So there's a visual there, so that we have a perspective on, maybe what's marketable, what's reasonable, what's a service project, and what's how it really looks. That's how a lot of times we learn on our marking is you mark something, then you get a cut, and then you go, and then you learn from it and do it different next time.
In response to Keith, we've done that on several projects. We've done that on the pilot project, and we did it on First 48. And I think it was, probably 5-6 years ago that we did that. There isn't any ribbons left, and the staffing has changed, and it doesn't look like there's much continuity between when we went to the field to do that and the reality on the ground right now.
Yeah, that's good to know. So you all did look at a variety of marking styles and densities, and you kind of settled on one that you like.
Well, we relied upon Tom Walls for this pretty heavily with the idea of, the necessity of maintaining shade, that we would pick, the best tree and then space off of that, plus some gap for canopy expansion, and come up with the prescription for that particular area. But every time you go around the curve in the road, the forest changes, so it isn't like we can have a standard prescription for everywhere, but for certain types of stands we can certainly do that, and we have done it. But we kind of need to start over because of we've been waiting for years and years and years for this project to happen. And First 48, we did a mark on that, or tied ribbons, and then Dan got involved in it after it was marked. It didn't quite make the grade, and he went out and remarked it himself to match our prescription. So it's, it's just a matter of we need to go back to field and do all that over again. I think the idea was great. It just never got implemented.
Makes
So
good sense. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
Tara, then Bob.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of field trips. Anything that gets me out from behind the screen and in the woods is like my #1 priority. I'm for that. Based on what I've heard, and based on kind of the timing of looking to put together a plan for moving forward, and then I would like to go to Westside Plantation and look at the concerns, because I heard that we were comfortable with the thinning, but we weren't happy with the fuels. So that's pretty straightforward for me I want to see what the concerns are, and then have a plan moving forward. So I don't have any wrong assumptions about what I think we did, and I want to hear what you guys have to say. clearly on pilot, that we can, I'd like to go out and we can do a sample mark, but I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. And we won't get every tree right in this process. I know that there will, the collaborative, you guys are so invested in pilot and have spent so much time on it, and it hasn't gotten across the finish line. And I want to see visually what your vision is. But Joseph hit the nail on the head that when you go around the corner, it changes a little bit. And marking in general, as long as I can fully understand the objective, both in the prescription, the NEPA, and talking with you folks, I think that'll be a good project to move forward to build some trust. But I will tell you, we won't get every tree right. And I think that from our side, I can only speak for the agency, that in trying to, that's part of the reason we never let the clutch out, for lack of a better word, is and Dan Dill was really a great shepherd for the projects on the Six Rivers. He was really in tune with what the collaborative was looking for. His background in wildlife was really helpful. And they went out and they did something, and then they adjusted. Then you guys reviewed what they did, what happened, and then you adjusted from there. I'm thrilled to go out to pilot and look at pilot with all of you, see what you think, and then go back afterwards and look at it and see if we hit the mark. And I'm most interested in that, but also in getting your ideas on the front end of what big picture you're looking for, what your overall objectives are, and so that I can use that to kind of strategize, and the priority areas moving forward. I'm very familiar with the Northwest Forest Plan and what we're looking for from a wildlife standpoint. But while I want to get in the weeds on some of this stuff, I really want to make sure I have a good idea, big picture of what all of you are looking at, for. And I think spending that time in the woods is going to help me get there, and keep to use a term, to keep the skids greased on the front end, to make sure we're going in the direction that we all agree on. So I just wanted to contribute that, if that's all right.
Okay, so Bob, Larry, and then Diana.
So it's a bit in the past at this point, but I wanted to clarify one thing Joseph said. We went out and determined the largest, dominant, most likely to live, long lived on the landscape trees, and flagged it. But we flagged it for retention. It was a leave tree mark, and that needs to be clear that we didn't flag it to take. We were doing a leave tree mark.
Yeah, that's
Small but
pretty
small but important.
Yeah. Okay, Larry, and then Diana.
Yeah, I just wanted to assure Tara, we're not looking for perfection. Only God is perfect. What we're looking for is a deep understanding of the concept, and we realize that we've been out in the field with different foresters who told us different things, so we know that it's gonna not be precise, but as long as the general concept is being followed as the prescription, that's the ball game.
Okay, great. Diana.
So I'm just hoping that anybody who's got, no matter what size crew, you can get every day somebody out there and do that brushing. Get rid of all that fire hazard and get it away from people's places, each one of the towns, just every day, rain or shine. That's what needs to be done, is get the brushing done, get it gone. And we need a lot of help. Last year scared the heck out of me. I'm sitting here shaking already. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Diana. I think everybody agrees with you that that's got to be a high priority. So,
Jerry here.
Go ahead, Jerry, and then Ted.
I just wanted to add on to Bob's comment, that the concept of the leaf tree then dictates what that landscape looks like, at least along the roadside. So that really is the starting determinant factor.
Right. Okay. Ted, and then Kenneth.
Diana really brought up something that I meant to share earlier and didn't, but you know, part of our challenge is we have these fire crews and it's great. We need to use that, maximize the work that they do, you know, every day they're on. Absolutely. And recognize that we really abuse them during the fire season and they work a lot of hours and we're beating them up. So that's one thing of it. But one thing that I'm again excited about that we have an opportunity for that we haven't had for a while is, so that fire organization was built to suppress fires, and then their additional duty is to help with the fuels management. What we're looking at a regional scale at a minimum, but also at the national scale is, all right, how do we build a fuels organization that is their primary focus is working on fuels, to get that work done, both the planning and the implementation. And I'm working on a team that's looking at, all right, what's the short-term answer to help build that up? But then, all right, for California, how do we want to organize to achieve these results that we're talking about? We need to be treating, you know, I was looking at, we need to be treating anywhere from 6 to 11 million acres a year in California. And if we're going to achieve that, what's the organization we need that's a mix of you know, agency folks, but built to work with partners as well. So yes, that is an important focus that we're looking at, and we're gonna change how we're organized so that we're not just relying on people that are you know, working really hard to put the fires out, but we have another organization that they can work together with that is really focused on, let's get those fuels treatments, let's get ahead of it so that we're not always, you know, fighting the fires.
Great. Thank you, Ted. Kenneth.
Okay, a few things. Back in '68, I worked on a fire crew up on the Mount Hood National Forest. We had actually 2 crews on the same district, 2 10-person crews. One week, one of the crews would do brush disposal along roads, and the other crew would run fire engines and drive all around the forest or the district. And that worked out really well. We were all available for fire if it occurred, and in the meantime, we were reducing fuel. The other thing I want to talk about is the pilot project marking. On the community forest, the first sale that we had on BLM, I flagged leaf trees adjacent to the Timber Ridge subdivision and invited people to come out and look so that they could see what the forest was going to look like after we logged. And that was very beneficial. People really appreciated that and had a lot of positive comments. I also worked on the Post Mountain area, and I did a training there on creating fuel, a fire safe forest. And I had the people, residents, mark what they considered to be leaf trees around the fire station. And then we would walk through the area and talk about what they marked, and I would give them recommendations on how I would have marked it. And that was also very successful. So I'm really in favor of doing a sample mark, but as has been pointed out, the stands are quite variable. So what will look good in one area will be different, you know, around the corner.
Thank you, Kenneth. Yeah, I remember doing both of those community projects efforts with you. So anybody, other comments, thoughts? Arnold, you've been kind of quiet.
I was going to back up Larry. I remember we all went out on, I think it was Acre Woods, the planned Acre Woods sale on the Six Rivers end. And we found lots of places where we would be happy to argue about specific trees or specific parts of the mark. And yet we all agreed that the marking crew succeeded. They did what we wanted overall. And so Tara, I think, can rest assured that there is some room for negotiation. There's always some room for argument, and the room appears to be for small arguments and big agreements. So it just needs to be, that particular marketing crew got the idea. We were really happy, but we can argue among ourselves about exactly how to mark. And so it seems critical to engage a marking crew and give them a test run and train them up. Otherwise, disaster is possible. That's the only thing I was thinking of adding.
Okay, thank you, Arnold. So sounding like a desire for more than one field trip between now and our next full collaborative meeting. We kind of agreed before that third Friday of the alternating months would be a field trip day. So that would be April 15th. So do your taxes before you go out in the field. But then do we want to have Kelly and I work with Tara to shop a second date for a field trip? Maybe, and maybe which one is should be the first field trip, West Side Plantation or pilot project? Go ahead, Bob.
Well, in my mind, the pilot project field trip needs to be after there is a sample marked, but before it's fully marked. So that window, whenever
Okay.
that is.
And Larry, you.
But
go ahead,
I'm
Jerry.
I'm wondering if, Bob, we need to take Tara out and kind of explain the whole sample, the whole marking, what we were looking for on the pilot project before they go
Before
out.
the marking crew starts.
Yeah. Bring Tom out and kind of walk through it. So she was asking for understanding the grander picture, and I think that would be a good first step.
Sure. Along with our white paper.
Yeah. Larry.
I was kind of thinking, while the pilot project's real important to me, I'm thinking because the West Side project's already kind of a done deal, I think that one maybe should be first.
Okay.
So we can make some changes to that as it moves forward, I hope.
And
Go ahead,
Larry,
Tara.
sorry, can I ask you a question, Larry? I'm just curious. Is it the NEPA approach to the fuels or just the implementation of the fuels work?
I'm just guessing, Tara, because I don't remember off the top of my head what the NEPA document said about it, but I believe it's the implementation that I think we're having a problem with.
Okay, and the reason that's so important to me is that that new tool that we have for determining NEPA adequacy, if that NEPA fits other plantations on the west side, that could be a way to expedite getting NEPA coverage for our plantations, is what I was thinking, on the west side that aren't in those identified watersheds, the insect and disease watersheds, but instead just plantations on the west side. So I would really, that field trip, that's why I would really like to go to the west side plantation, is to hear you said you were comfortable with the thinning, but the fuels work wasn't up to snuff. And so I want to kind of flesh out if that was an implementation issue or a planning issue. So that's what I was thinking, Pat, why I kind of, my ears perked up on that one, because we have a lot of plantations on the west side to get treated.
And maybe going out in the field, Tara will be able to instruct us which it is, or maybe it's a combination of both. So.
Okay, so maybe that would be our April 15th.
Sure.
Sound okay? So we'll figure out the details of the logistics of it between now and then and let people know. And Tara probably can pull the decision document so we know, so we have something to look at to decide whether it was a NEPA failure or an implementation failure. And my recollection of the time we did go out and look at that, remember it was snowing a little bit in October. I can't remember the year, but I do recall people saying that, to Tom Hall and his staff, that the implementation looked like what people had anticipated as far as the thinning itself. And there were a lot of questions about when is the one of the activity fuels, so to speak, going to be taken care of. And I think there were also issues that were it had Joint Chiefs funding, and also wasn't there stewardship money that was supposed to go into the slash removal, and maybe that's where things fell apart.
Okay, and I'll also
Okay.
make sure that I bring the timber sale contracting officer with me, because one of the things I heard from this group before that kind of made my ears perk up is, hey, just because a timber sale goes on for 7 years, do we have to sit and have that slash, that's associated with the logging sit there for 7 years? And the answer is no. And but the timber sale contracting officer, so once we finish a unit, the contracting officer can then basically eliminate that unit from the contract, which frees up the fuels work, whether it's burning or post-harvest machine, whatever that looks like. So I'll bring her as well, and we can make sure we're talking the same language. Because I was disappointed when that came up, because that was an easy fix. As a contract officer, we could fix that, and I was disappointed I wasn't aware and that we didn't do that. So to get all of us on the same page, I think would be huge.
Okay. So what else would our numbers are dwindling here? Arnold.
So what has become of the updated white paper project?
I'll let Carol kind of touch on that.
So I thought, did you send it to Arnold?
I don't think Arnold was one of the ones you told me. I sent it to Larry, Jerry, and Tom.
Oh, my apologies, Arnold. So I started to try to figure out what our new vision was. So mostly Pat can send it out to everybody now, I guess. So there's a couple of pages of background, like, what the original white paper was just forestry, and then it got amended after community input to add like the agriculture and rural development, economic development, and all that stuff. So we had the second white paper that was pretty broad. And so I kind of just talked about that. I mean, all the original things that the collaborative was going to do, which have since kind of narrowed down to, the two primary things we're doing right now are the most active things, I should say, are the forestry and the fire kill to fuel break committee, and then the recreation committee. The program of work, and at one point we had 14 different committees, but like the Stafford and all those have all gone away. Sims, I forget what they all were, all the different committees. So basically, I'm just at the end of this draft, I've just posed some questions like, what do you guys want to do? Do we narrow our goals back to the forestry goals? And then in which case, what happens to recreation? Do we keep the wider goals that included like I mentioned earlier, the cannabis marijuana committee, the program of work committee? Do we mostly work with the Forest Service and just, keep BLM? One of my questions was, how does the new 10-year plan fit in with a collaborative? And that's mostly what we've been talking about today. One of the questions that was raised to me was, do we focus on fuel reduction and catastrophic fire prevention or post-fire recovery? We trying to get ahead of the game or provide more input? I mean, lately, the last couple of years, what we've mostly provided input on is post-fire recovery. And is that where we mostly want to, interact with the Forest Service? So how do we recruit new members? How do we interact with the Fire Safe Council? Because, a lot of the catastrophic fire prevention stuff is sort of being addressed by the Fire Safe Council, except that the Forest Service has pretty much dropped out of the Fire Safe Council. Well, you haven't been there at the last 4 or 5 meetings. So it'd be lovely to see you guys there every month. I know it's a big ask. So anyway, those were just the questions, you know. I was kind of like, I don't know how to write up the white paper for what our future looks like because I didn't know the answers to those questions.
So it seems maybe like me or having Kelly send that out to everybody to start chewing on is maybe the next step.
But yeah, I think it would be good to have a rewritten, rebooted, reset idea of what it is exactly the collaborative wants to do. That's why I mentioned that to Rachel. I think, a lot of it's going to be forestry, but is that all we're going to, interact with the Forest Service on, or is it going to include the other stuff? I don't know. What do you guys want to do? That's my question.
So anybody, any thoughts at this point? People are getting hungry for lunch, I can tell. Go ahead, Larry.
I'm for keeping the original categories that we had when we started. I think they were important. I think recreation's a big deal around here. I think that's an important one to keep on. The trespass cannabis stuff has diminished in its severity, but it's still an issue that we'll probably have to deal with into the future, especially the cleanup of the sites. So I would say that probably needs to stay with us. And the program of work, I think that fell apart, but I think that we need to keep that going.
Yeah, I agree with all those, I guess, but the original, we also included a lot of work with rural development. If you'll remember, we were working on the mobile poultry processing and the commercial kitchen and just a lot of grants with rural development. And rural development hasn't attended collaborative meetings for years. We did all the farm to school stuff. We were looking at community facilities grants, so I'm thinking that was a little too broad.
So Kenneth and Joseph or Susan.
Well, we're kind of put together to help the Board of Supervisors, as I understand it, and whatever issues that they are dealing with that involve the National Forest or BLM seems to be ones that we should be involved with.
Yeah, I think it's just after Vilsack came, it broadened to be the U.S. Department of Agriculture as a whole. So not just the Forest Service, but rural development and NRCS, Department of Agriculture. So we were looking at all the different, since he was the Secretary of Agriculture, we were looking at interacting with all those different parts of USDA. And now we're pretty much just dealing with Forest Service and BLM. And that's okay. That was the question. Do we want to go back to what we were originally working on? We were talking about things like biomass and workforce development and stuff like that. That's in the 10-year plan. If we wanted to go back and start providing input on that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I would like to see
Go ahead, Susan.
the continuation with the trespass grows and the marijuana. I think is still a very major issue. Certainly there has been some diminishing of the trespass grows, but this is a very, very important thing that the supervisors do deal with through the planning department primarily. And I think that even though Sheriff Saxon, being a private land focus, he is included in a lot of the federal trespass grow issues. And it would be good to get a report from him and perhaps from Greta too, from the Research Ecology Center and water. So of course we need to prioritize them for the next, perhaps the next meeting. I could really be helpful to have a report of where we're at.
Okay, thank you, Susan.
And also what questions we'd like to see answered by those people and which ones what priority and what, how we would like to proceed with that.
Right. Okay. So any other thoughts on this at this point? People are wearing down. No? So,
Should we try to include something like that in our next May meeting? So
I
that we
was
can start to plan?
writing down those as potential agenda items for the next meeting.
Good, thank you.
Well, okay, if you're talking about agenda building, then if you send out my draft, I sent it out and I said I tried to figure out where we were and then what are the questions that we need to answer going forward, and then I gave up basically. Sorry. So yeah, I mean, if we can get, that would be to me one thing to have on the agenda next time, is to figure out exactly, you know, what is our vision, you know,
Yeah.
kind of come to that consensus, and you know, what do we want to work on as we go forward.
Right, I've written that down.
Okay, and then the alert wildfire cameras, that's still an issue.
Oh, thank you.
What?
Yeah, so keep the fire in the agenda, please, the anti-fire
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, that'll certainly be.
Always,
Yeah.
every day. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
So Pat, will you send out Carol's paper to everybody in the collaborative so that they can think about it and come to the next meeting with some thought and some ideas rather than springing it on everybody at the meeting?
It'll get sent out ahead of time. It
Great.
probably will be Kelly who'll send it out instead of me, because
Okay,
he understands that Gmail stuff better than I do.
yeah, but I think that, you know, the whole.
Yeah, it'll go
collaborative-
out hopefully next week.
Okay, it feels that the whole collaborative, whatever the size of it, needs
Yeah.
to chime in and have some input on it before anybody really wraps
Right.
their arms around it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
One thing to think about is really, you know, where we overlap or duplicate the Fire Safe Council, because, you know, the Fire Safe Council meets monthly and they are the implementers. So they're, you know, the people that are, you know, the Watershed Center, the RCD, you know, where exactly are their projects? So when the collaborative gets a update every month of like where those projects are, the Fire Safe Council is getting the same thing. And so, you know, maybe that part of that's been in the collaborative agenda of who's doing what where. If you're interested in the details of that, maybe it's just listen to the Fire Safe Council, and then that could let the collaborative be more future projects, you know, and prioritization and that kind of stuff, the bigger picture.
Well, Larry Winters will have some input on that for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure he will. Okay. So anything else? I have something, probably a Ted question, Ted and Rachel, but Rachel's gone. So one of the things that I've been thinking about a bit and thinking about new leadership, and we kind of focus on new leaders at the forest level, but we also have new leaders at the regional level. And I'm kind of curious, how informed is the regional office about our collaborative and our long-term collaboration? And do we need to do something as a collaborative to bump that, our how they see us better? Because I have no idea. And frankly, I can't even on top of my head come up with the name of the new regional forester. Because it was so long, it was Randy Moore that's kind of burned into my skull. So how do we need to, we used to have somebody from the regional office would participate maybe a couple of times a year, at least by phone, in our collaborative meetings. And we haven't had that kind of interaction in a long time.
Yeah, so it doesn't hurt. And we could put some thought into what's the right venue that gets the most return for investment, whether we, if we're able to get someone up. So Jennifer Eberline's our regional forester. She's fantastic. She was here as a deputy regional forester and then went away and then came back as regional forester. So she's fairly familiar with the programs. But whether it's her or whether it's one of the deputy regional foresters, inviting them out to one of our collaborative meetings or to one of the field trips, I think that's time well spent. But in general, they're aware of you and they're aware of the group and kind of the profile of the group and the investment there. In general, that's the case. So one thing you have going for you is, as I think we've shared before, all the national forests in California are divided into zones, and we're in the north zone that's inclusive of the 6 national forests of the northern end. And as part of that, we have our budget is given, at a zone level, and we organize mostly around things at the zone level instead of necessarily at the unit level. And one of the ways that we organize is around kind of natural resources management. And every Friday, and that's why I asked for a delay, is every Friday we have a check-in on how things are going. And the check-in, Rachel and I are the 2 representatives for the North Zone on the check-in. So they hear a lot more about the 6 rivers and the Shasta Trinity than they hear about the Modoc and the Mendocino and the Klamath, just because that's who's on there. And that check-in's at the deputy regional forester level. So like today we shared about the meeting we're having today and the topics we're having. And so I don't think you need to worry that that they're not aware of your relevance and importance and integral part of how we work here in Trinity County, between the 2 forests in particular. But it doesn't hurt to invite them out and be thoughtful about what are the types of venues, again, whether it's a meeting or whether it's a field trip that would be the most beneficial to that investment of their time.
Okay, great. Well, we'll work with you and Rachel on that then. So anything else? So I'm thinking, Kelly McElroy, if you wouldn't mind sending the PowerPoint or the slideshow to Kelly so that maybe we can get it on the website and maybe actually a PDF of it send out to people so that if folks missed today, they would at least have that same information.
Sure, I can do that.
Great. Well, with that, I guess I'm going to give you go ahead.
One more, and it's totally off subject, but
That's okay.
If you're in Weaverville today, Alessia Ratachka, who's the Ukrainian national, is selling baked goods at the bandstand, raising money, 100% going to support the Ukraine. So starting at 2 o'clock to 7. So if you're passing through town.
At the bandstand, right?
At the bandstand, yep.
Yeah, okay. Okay, well, I'm
And
giving
I'd
you,
like to say
go ahead.
I just want to say how encouraged I am from our discussion today, especially because of the participation of all you agency folks, Ted, Rachel.
Hear, hear.
It's just marvelous. Your willingness to work with us and the kinds of information that you're bringing and asking for our input.
Yeah.
And Kelly too. It's just really
Great.
very, very encouraging.
Yeah, I appreciate it too. And Tara, kind of a little advertisement, she's got some community workshops coming up April 5th in Trinity Center, April 6th in Weaverville, April 7th down in Burnt Ranch. I think they all start at 5:30. Is that correct, Tara?
Yep, they all start at 5:30. Thanks, Pat. You're a
Yeah.
great wingman. It's like we spend a lot of time together in committees.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
Well, we had a thing on the agenda that said talk about community meetings, so I figured I better throw that in. So with
Yeah, I
that,
appreciate
everybody
it.
gets a little bit of extra time off today. So thank you, everybody, for enduring another Zoom meeting. Ted and Kelly, thank you on behalf of everybody who put together the slideshow that really kind of organized, I think, things really, really well. So anyway, with that, I think all I have to do is end this meeting and the recording goes into the cloud. So thanks a lot, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
thanks,
very
everyone.
much.
Bye.
Thank you.